The guards found him hiding beneath an abandoned villa outside Rome, crouched in a wine cellar that smelled of mold and spilled vinegar. In his trembling hand was a small glass vial. Poison. He was barely 20 years old. This was Sporus. Once dressed as an empress, once married to the ruler of the Roman world, now moments away from killing himself rather than face what the new emperor had planned for him inside the Colosseum the next morning. The execution order was already written. Not a private death, not mercy, a public spectacle. He was to be dragged into the arena, stripped, used, and killed in front of cheering crowds as part of a myth reenactment meant to mock the memory of Nero himself. And for Sporus, death felt kinder than one more performance. Because for the last 3 years, Sporus had not been allowed to exist as a human being at all. He had been turned into someone else, not metaphorically, not symbolically, physically, psychologically, surgically. This is not just another story of Roman cruelty. It is the most extreme act of identity theft ever recorded, where an emperor did not steal a body or a name or a title, but erased a teenage boy completely to resurrect his dead wife. To understand why Sporus chose poison in that dark cellar, we need to go back 3 years, to the night Emperor Nero murdered the woman he loved most and decided reality itself would no longer be allowed to stop him. Rome, 65 AD. The most powerful man on earth had just committed murder, not in war, not through execution, in his own private chambers. Poppaea Sabina, pregnant, empress of Rome, lay dying on the marble floor. Some accounts say Nero struck her with a single violent kick to the stomach. Others describe a beating so brutal that servants heard bones crack through the walls. When Nero realized what he had done, he screamed for physicians. But even an emperor could not command death to reverse itself. Poppaea was gone, and something inside Nero fractured permanently. This was not normal grief. When you rule over 60 million people, when you are raised to believe you are chosen by destiny, the death of someone you love does not feel like loss. It feels like an insult, a boundary that dares to exist in a world where everything else bends to your will. Nero refused to cremate her. Instead, he ordered Poppaea's body embalmed with obscene quantities of imported spices, more than entire provinces produced in a year. Her corpse was dressed in her finest gowns and sealed inside a crystal sarcophagus so he could see her whenever he wished. Servants reported the emperor speaking to the body, setting places for her at banquets, asking her opinion on matters of state. At night, Nero could not sleep without massive doses of poppy wine. He woke screaming her name. Food lost all taste, unless it was prepared exactly as she preferred. Her chambers were preserved perfectly, down to the placement of a single hairbrush. The court waited for grief to pass. It didn't. It evolved. 2 months later, Nero began seeing Poppaea everywhere, in the face of a slave girl pouring wine, in the profile of a senator's wife. In prostitutes dragged panicked into palace corridors while Nero grabbed their faces, twisting them toward the light, searching for something that wasn't there. Hundreds of portraits were commissioned. When artists failed to capture her essence, Nero flew into rages, sometimes ordering beatings, sometimes collapsing into sobbing fits. And then, one day, everything changed. It was late 65 AD. Nero sat reviewing administrative appointments, tedious work he normally avoided, when a newly promoted teenage freedman was brought forward for confirmation. The emperor looked up and froze. The boy could not have been more than 15. He had Poppaea's eyes, not similar eyes, not a vague resemblance. The same enormous, dark-lashed eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same unconscious tilt of the head when nervous. Even the same rare amber flecks in the irises that caught the oil lamp light. Scrolls fell to the floor as Nero rose from his throne. The court held its breath as the emperor circled the boy slowly, touching his face, lifting his chin, watching how light moved across familiar features. This wasn't rage. This was something worse. Hope. What is your name? Nero whispered. Sporus, the boy replied. I am Sporus. In that moment, Sporus ceased to exist. He became a solution. Sporus had been born inside the imperial household, the child of a Germanic captive who died in childbirth. Educated, intelligent, delicate-featured, he had been trained for clerical service. None of it mattered now. For days, Nero kept Sporus confined to luxury chambers beside his own. Artists sketched him from every angle. Physicians measured his bones, tutors listened to his speech. Nero compared each detail obsessively against preserved images of Poppaea, marking deviations, planning corrections. Sporus was forbidden to use his name. Servants were ordered to call him Lady. His tunics were replaced with gowns. Cosmetics replaced soap. His voice was corrected, softened, reshaped, and then Nero made the decision. Sporus would not just resemble Poppaea, he would become her. The physicians were summoned, the instruments prepared. The transformation would be permanent, and it would begin in blood. The transformation did not begin with the blade. That came later. First, Nero studied Sporus the way craftsmen study raw marble, not as a person, but as potential. For days, the boy was confined to chambers beside the emperor's own, not cells. Luxurious rooms, soft bedding, rich food, silence, the cruelty hid behind comfort. Artists were summoned, painters who had once captured Poppaea from life. They sketched Sporus from every angle, front, profile, candlelight, shadow. Physicians followed. They measured bone length, shoulder width, hip shape, jawline. They murmured adjustments under their breath. Nero hovered over them all, watching, correcting, planning. Differences were circled in red wax, too broad here, too sharp there. Nothing was dismissed as impossible. Sporus was forbidden to use his own name. Servants were instructed to call him Domina, my lady. His tunics disappeared overnight. In their place came flowing silks in Poppaea's favorite colors, pale violet, soft gold, rose. Gowns designed to hide bone, to soften outline, to deceive the eye. Each morning, servants applied cosmetics, not the austere touches worn by Roman men, but the elaborate masks reserved for noble women. Powder thickened his skin. Pigment shaped cheeks that were not meant to curve that way. And always, Nero watched, correcting posture, adjusting gesture, stopping him mid-sentence. Voice training followed. Hours each day, Sporus repeated phrases aloud. His voice pushed higher, softened, reshaped. Tutors corrected cadence, lengthened vowels, breath control, laugh again, slower, lighter. That's closer. Every deviation was noted, every failure remembered. And slowly, something worse than pain began. Sporus stopped speaking unless spoken to, stopped eating unless prompted, moved through the palace like someone walking in a dream, not meant for them. Because by now, he understood. This was not costume, this was not play acting, this was permanent. The physicians were summoned, not quietly, openly. Nero spoke of the procedure with excitement, like an artist describing a long-imagined masterpiece. The operation would not simply remove masculinity. Eunuchs already existed in Rome. That was not enough. This would be creation. The physicians were promised rewards beyond imagining. Land, wealth, protection. They were also reminded of the alternative. Refusal meant death. Failure meant death. The procedures they devised went beyond precedent. Irreversible changes meant to approximate a woman's body as closely as Roman medicine allowed. The night before the surgery, Nero visited Sporus alone. He brought a small wooden box. Inside was Poppaea's wedding ring, a massive emerald encircled by pearls. Nero took Sporus's hand and slid the ring onto his finger. It hung loosely. "Tomorrow," Nero said softly, "you will be reborn. You will finally be who you were meant to be. And I will love you as I loved her." Sporus spoke for the first time in hours. "Will it hurt?" For a brief moment, something human flickered in Nero's eyes. Then it vanished. "Birth always hurts," he replied, "but beauty is worth it." The surgery lasted for hours. Roman history spares us the details, but not the sounds. Screams echoed through the medical wing, far beyond the thick stone walls. Servants counted the time by how long they could still hear them. Nero waited outside, not pacing in dread, pacing in anticipation. He spoke to the door, encouraged, reassured, like a father waiting for a child to be born. When it was over, Sporus did not wake for days. Recovery took months. Infection hovered constantly. Fever came and went. His body had to relearn basic functions. Through it all, Nero remained close, adjusting pain doses. inspecting bandages, reading Poppaea's favorite poems aloud. At night, he told stories. Memories Sporus had never lived, moments he was now expected to remember. The lines between past and present began to blur, between who Sporus was and who he was being forced to become. When Sporus finally walked again, the training resumed. Relentlessly, tutors drilled him in movement. Smaller steps, lower gaze, a softened sway, hands trained to pour wine delicately, to recline properly at banquets, to gesture without command. Voice lessons intensified, higher, softer, controlled the breath, again. A wardrobe followed, not clothing, but replicas. Seamstresses reconstructed Poppaea's most iconic gowns from preserved patterns. Jewelers reset her jewelry to fit Sporus's altered body. Her perfumes were recreated using the same rare oils imported from across the empire. Nothing new. Everything copied, even memory. Sporus was given Poppaea's history to study. Childhood, friends, lovers, opinions. When Nero reminisced, Sporus had to respond as if he remembered too. Any hesitation brought silence. And silence was dangerous. 6 months after the surgery, Nero unveiled his creation. A private dinner, only his closest allies. When Sporus entered the room, conversation stopped. Wine cups froze mid-air. The resemblance was uncanny. In lamplight, with cosmetics perfectly applied, Sporus looked disturbingly like the dead empress. The movement, the expression, the practiced smile. Nero watched their reactions closely. He held Sporus possessively, introducing him without irony. My beloved Sabina. The courtiers understood the rules. They complied. Compliments poured out. Questions were asked. Laughter filled the room. Reality bent under survival instinct, but not perfectly. Some noticed the hands, slightly too large, the shoulders, a fraction too broad, the voice, breaking occasionally under strain, and worse, moments when Sporus himself surfaced. A sharp observation, a dry remark, a sadness that had nothing to do with Poppaea. Each time it happened, Nero withdrew, cold, distant, and the message was clear: perform better, or be replaced. The wedding announcement followed. Early 67 AD, the Emperor of Rome would marry. The bride, Sabina. Preparations moved forward with horrifying normality. Priests prepared sacrifices. Planners consulted marriage law. Invitations were sent to every senator and magistrate in Rome. The ceremony followed tradition exactly. Sporus wore the saffron veil of a Roman bride. Contracts were signed, dowry transferred, vows spoken. Nero carried him over the threshold as custom demanded. The feast was obscene in scale. Peacocks, wine from imperial reserves, music without pause. Poets composed verses praising the union. Gifts arrived. Jewelry, fertility charms, household goods. Everyone smiled. Everyone applauded. Because everyone understood the truth. This was not love. This was not marriage. This was the final erasure of a teenage boy, made complete in front of an empire too afraid to look away. And worse was still coming. Marriage did not bring stability. It solidified the prison. From the day of the wedding forward, Sporus ceased to exist even privately. There were no moments off stage. Every morning began the same way. Servants entered Poppaea's preserved chambers and woke him as if waking the dead woman herself. Her jewelry waited on trays. Her dresses hung in exact order. Even the scent in the room, frankincense, myrrh, rose oil, had been recreated to match memory. Hairstyled, cosmetics applied, gestures corrected. There was no mirror in the room large enough to show his entire body, only fragments. A mouth that was not his. Eyes trained to soften. Hands learning how to move delicately enough to be believable. Nero insisted on absolute immersion. Sporus did not dine as himself, did not speak as himself, did not sleep as himself. He was expected to respond not merely as a woman, but as Poppaea. When Nero reached for him in private, it was not affection he demanded, it was accuracy. Did she laugh this way? Did she hesitate here? Did she answer like that? Any failure broke the illusion, and when the illusion broke, Nero became dangerous. Not violent, worse, cold, dismissive, silent. For someone whose survival depended on pleasing an emperor, silence felt like a death sentence. Public life offered no refuge. Nero paraded his recreated bride everywhere: the theatre, the races, religious ceremonies, state functions. Sporus sat in the empress's box at the Colosseum while the crowd stared at something it could not fully understand. A figure dressed as a dead woman, treated as imperial, yet visibly wrong in ways no one dared name. The Roman people loved spectacle, and this was the strangest thing they'd ever seen. Some whispered, some laughed, some watched in uneasy silence. None spoke openly. Silence was survival. In 67 AD, Nero left Rome on a grand tour of Greece. Sporus went with him. The performance followed. The Greeks, eager to please their imperial masters, welcomed Sabina with ceremony. Banquets were held in her honor. Priests prayed for the couple's fertility, a fiction so complete it bordered on madness. Sporus presided over courts, sat beside Nero during performances, appeared in rituals reserved for the emperor's wife, but it was in private that the damage compounded. Nero expected intimacy not just with the partner, but with memory. Sporus had to know things he had never witnessed: private jokes, shared silences, tender moments that belonged to a dead woman. Each night required reenactment. Each failure felt catastrophic. Observers later described Sporus as existing in a liminal state, neither man nor woman, neither slave nor free, neither alive as himself, nor fully what Nero demanded. Sometimes servants found him alone in the gardens before dawn, standing completely still, as if unsure how to exist without instruction. There were attempts to escape. There had to be, but Sporus was unmissable. The jewelry, the clothes, the face every Roman now recognized. The one recorded attempt ended quickly. Those who helped him were captured and crucified in the palace courtyard. Their bodies were left where Sporus could see them from his window. A message: escape leads to suffering shared. After that, Sporus stopped trying. The emperor's kindness. Nero, in his madness, truly believed he had resurrected his love. He protected Sporus fiercely, showered him with gifts, spoke of devotion, displayed moments of what looked like tenderness. To outsiders, it resembled affection, but love cannot exist where identity has been destroyed. What Nero loved was not a person. It was a reflection. Over time, the damage showed. Servants reported strange behaviors. Sporus began referring to himself as Poppaea, even when Nero was not present. He spoke to mirrors, sometimes in two voices, one soft, one familiar, neither entirely real. The boy's mind adapted the only way it could, by breaking. Then Rome began to collapse. In early 68 AD, revolts spread across the empire. The Senate turned against Nero. The Praetorian Guard abandoned him. Suddenly, the man who ruled the world had nowhere to go. When Nero fled Rome under cover of darkness, Sporus went with him. Even as the empire fell apart, Nero refused to abandon his creation. Witnesses described the emperor clinging to Sporus in the final days, calling him "my only love, my resurrection," begging him to die together like tragic lovers from myth. When word came that capture was imminent, Nero chose suicide. But even then, the performance did not end. He asked Sporus to begin the ritual lamentations, to mourn him as Poppaea would have mourned. As Nero pressed the dagger to his throat, his hands began to shake. It was Sporus who guided the blade, perhaps the only act of mercy either of them would ever know. Nero was dead, and Sporus was finally free. Or so it should have been, but freedom never came. Instead, ownership transferred. Without Nero, Sporus became a symbol, a trophy, a curiosity, a reminder. Galba, the next emperor, kept him in the palace, but ignored him. For months, Sporus remained trapped in ambiguity. Still dressed as a woman, still called Sabina, but no longer the center of attention. When Galba was murdered, Sporus passed to Otho. Otho had known the real Poppaea. She had once been his wife. His interest in Sporus was unsettling. Sources suggest he considered marrying him, perhaps revival, perhaps revenge, perhaps both. Otho's reign ended quickly, suicide after military defeat. Then came Vitellius, and with him, the end. Vitellius had no interest in illusion. To him, Sporus was entertainment. The announcement came without subtlety. Sporus would appear in the Colosseum, not as empress, as a victim. He would reenact the myth of Proserpina, abducted, violated, and killed, dragged into the arena, publicly raped, then executed, for the amusement of Rome. When Sporus learned what awaited him, something long buried surfaced. Choice. Rather than submit to one final performance, he chose death. The sources differ. Poison. Opened veins. What matters is that it was his decision. At around 20 years old, Sporus ended his life. Not as Poppaea, not as Sabina, but refusing further erasure. The story of Sporus is not simply Nero's cruelty, it is a warning of what happens when power is obeyed without conscience, when truth is replaced with performance, when an entire society chooses comfort over humanity. Hundreds participated: physicians, tutors, spies, courtiers, priests, officials, all chose survival at the cost of a boy's existence. The real Sporus is lost forever. We don't know his dreams, his humor, his fears before Nero noticed him. That person was erased so completely that even his name may have been a mockery. Yet in the final moment, when the empire demanded one last role, he refused. And in refusal, reclaimed the only thing ever taken from him that could never truly belong to another: his agency.